the capital and largest city of Azerbaijan, the largest city on the Caspian Sea, and also known as the lowest lying national capital in the world. Yes, we are going to talk about Baku. Everyone, welcome to Travel Explore Celebrate Life. Without wasting any time, Sunila, I'm going to get right into the episode. Tell us, what can you see in Baku?
Neil, there's a lot to see in Baku. And for me, I remember when I went there and I was walking by the old town and then I came to the new town area. And I'm looking at it and thinking, this reminds me so much of Paris. Like I feel like I'm in Paris. And I that was the last thing I expected in Baku. Uh, but it was so beautiful. And then I actually looked up, it was in reverse. I actually read up about it later. And yes, it is called the Paris of the East because the architecture in Baku is something simply amazing. So, to put it simply, I would divide it into old Baku and new Baku and a few excursions from Baku, which are like half an hour away. Or if you want to do something longer, then about 3, 4 hours away. And I think that's the best way to really put Baku into perspective as to what to do and see there.
So, you mentioned it's called the Paris of the East.
Mhm,
Somewhere I read that it's also got like this little Venice. What is a
mhm.
more apt description of Baku? Like, would you compare it to Venice? Would you compare it to Paris? Because Little Venice is just a small thing, right? I think it's a little overrated.
Yeah. No, Neil, Little Venice is, well, how should I put it? So they have this beautiful boulevard. And, if you see, look at the location of Baku, it is a port city on the Caspian Sea. So you're right on the shore. And by the shore, I think after 1991, when they had independence and they started developing Baku, they built this beautiful promenade. So you can spend an entire evening at the promenade and you have the famous flame towers, which we'll talk about later. You can see that in the backdrop, and you have fountains everywhere. You have these gardens, and within that, a small area, like it's called Little Venice on the boulevard. So a small area is this Little Venice, and they had little gondolas taking people across on that. So it was quite sweet, but I think it was more like what the locals like to do when they have some time. So I wouldn't really call it Venice. So it is nowhere near Venice. But yes, the older buildings, when you look at it, like when, they started they started opening up, and uh, they built all the buildings to mimic Paris and the rest of the European cities. So yeah, I would
So,
say more like
so
Paris of
I
the East.
yeah, I guess we've established that it's the Paris of the East. Now,
Mhm.
see, Baku is located at about 28 meters below sea level,
Below the
so it
sea level.
becomes like the
Yeah.
world's lowest lying national capital city, and
Mhm.
also, like I said, biggest city located below sea level. Now, you
Mhm.
mentioned the flame towers and the
Mhm.
fire. Like, see, we are going to talk about what to do in Baku, what to see, what happens in
Mhm.
Baku, and I think a good point to start would be talking about the fire, talking about the flame. And there are multiple places that represent or depict this flame, right?
Yes, Neil. So, Azerbaijan in general, and of course, Baku, you cannot miss the fact that fire is worshipped here. And the city's history of fire worship goes a long way back. And I think it's so beautiful that the most iconic tower of Baku and of Azerbaijan today, like you look at the flame towers and you're talking about Baku. You don't have to think of what are we speaking about. And that they have dedicated these stars to the worshipping of fire. So, about half an hour to 40 minutes away from Baku is a place called Yanar Dag. And Yanar Dag is a place where you have naturally burning gas. It burns day and night. And ever since people have known about the land, they've seen the fire burning. It's never gone out, and it just keeps burning. So you have the side of the mountain where you have natural fire burning all the time. And this was the history. And in fact, they say that Zoroastrians pray to the fire. You have the fire god and all of that, and in all the temples fire is an important thing. And apparently it all starts from Yanardak. So that is one history. On the other side, you also have Atishga, which is a temple, which is a fire temple. And in Atishga, it is known as the fire temple of Baku, again about 30, 40 minutes away. And this is in a town called Surakhani, which is a suburb of Baku. Neil, what is really interesting, and for me, this was very, very interesting because once you go there, you actually see Persian and Indian inscriptions. So you see, something for Lord Ganesha also written out there. And they say that this temple was used by the Hindus, Sikhs, and Zoroastrians as a place of worship. And Atash is the Persian word for fire. So Atashka is the fire temple. And during the time of the Silk Road, that is when the Hindus and the Sikhs and Zoroastrians were passing through, and they built a fire temple out there. So they say that it probably started as a Zoroastrian temple, and then the Hindus, Sikhs, everybody. So you have Shri Ganesha and Namaha written out there. So that's pretty amazing. And it was a great connect with India. So on the one hand, you have those burning temples and fires, and then you have the flame towers, which is like an ultra modern building, amazing looking. You can take a little funicular and go up a mountain, and from there you have a nice view, and you come very close to the flame towers as well. And in the flame towers you have a hotel. The Fairmont Hotel is out there. There are residences. It's just amazing, very luxurious, very modern. And like I think we were talking about it, it's like so many LEDs, and it's lit up. And you actually, when you stand, like you mentioned Venice on the boulevard, you stand there and you look up, and you can see it sometimes in the colors of the fire being lit up, and other times, like we discussed other places, it's also like advertising, so you can see a lot of advertisements up there.
So, the flame towers are like, I've seen many videos where, of course, the flame burns at night through the LED screens on the towers, right?
Mhm.
But there are like on the Discovery Channel documentary, Extreme Engineering, the flame towers had featured and this
Mhm.
documentary has often featured the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty, the Burj Khalifa, and all of that. So the flame towers are there. Something that, tells me is unique about Azerbaijan and Baku in particular is that, see, the shape of the flame towers depict a flame.
Mhm.
Similar to that, I think there's a museum dedicated to carpets in the shape of
Yes.
a carpet, right?
Yes, and that is very close by. So when you're near the boulevard, and we were there, and it was funny. Like you're walking, and suddenly you see this huge carpet coming out of nowhere, and you actually reach the Azerbaijan Carpet Museum. Very beautiful place. I think it's one of the must-dos, though. All through Turkey and the whole Caucasus region that we say, you have carpets everywhere, and you can see that in the Azerbaijan as well. And inside the carpet museum, you can actually see carpets depicting almost like art. So you have, the history of Azerbaijan in the form of carpets being made, the whole warp and the weft and everything that goes into weaving a carpet, all that. But one interesting thing that I really found there are these little, like in a glass thing, there are these little, cases that are kept. And when you check what are they, so they're actually mustache covers. So in the past, the Azerbaijanis really treasured their mustache, and they wanted to maintain the shape. They didn't have hair gel or whatever. So they used to, keep their mustache in, they used to wear a cover on the mustache to maintain the shape of it for the next day, which I thought, and they were like pretty embroidered small little cases. I think that was really quite interesting.
So speaking of small things, there's also a museum dedicated to miniature books, and that opened in 2002, right? When you were in Azerbaijan, did you get a chance to visit this museum?
No, no, Neil. In fact, I had gone for like a recce tour, what we say, to check out the facilities for corporate tours and incentive tours. So I didn't really get a chance to go and see the museum of the miniature books, but I thought it was just so amazing to have that museum. But what I did do was really walk in the old town, and you can't miss it. So when you're walking in old town, and I think we'll come to what do we really see in Baku. So in the old town, you have the Maiden's Tower, and you have the Palace of the Shirvanshahs. And they're really beautiful structures, 12th century tower, the Maiden Tower, and 15th century Palace of the Shirvanshahs. And when you're walking by, you see the fortification, you see the tower, and these old narrow streets that you can walk by, get lost in them. So it's really amazing that at one point you're looking at all the modern, the boulevard, flame towers, and the other point you're transported back in time. And the Maiden Tower has this lot of legends as to why it was built. But one of them is that the enemy was attacking, in short, and the people of Azerbaijan were fighting them, and they prayed to the fire god and said that, look, if you save us, you have to save us. And the fire god took the form of a girl who appeared from the tower, and the hair was actually all fire. And she said, but you have to hide my hair, because if the enemy can't know that I'm a girl. And of course, she won, and the tower was never defeated. And they say that probably that's why it's also called the Maiden Tower, because no one ever defeated it, and it remains single in that sense till
it's
this date.
it's also
So
it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, right, along with the entire
that's
old
right.
city.
That's
And
right. The Maiden
yeah,
Tower and the palace both are UNESCO World Heritage Sites.
yeah, and within the Maiden Tower is Nizam, or within Old City is Nizami Street, right?
That's
So
right.
yeah, so Nizami Street is like that street where everything, like the food, the nightlife, and all of that really comes alive. But I want to go back to the museum of the world's, like, museum of miniature books, right?
Hmm.
So there are 6,500 books there from 64 nations,
Wow.
but it also has three of the world's smallest books, which
Oh.
means they can only be read through a magnifying glass. That I found was quite interesting. We'll come to the food and nightlife bit a little bit
Hmm.
later. But see, if I'm going to Baku, I have three questions for you.
Hmm.
One is, you've told me a few of the places that you should visit within the city. So, one,
Hmm.
can you tell me a little bit about the excursions that I could do? Another thing is it a cheap destination? And like, how has Baku become so famous over the last few years?
Yeah, Neil, I think I'll go in the reverse. And Baku has become famous. If you well, they used to produce more than half of the world's oil production was happening in Baku, right? And that kind of really made them rich as a rich country, and they've really spent a lot on their country as well. And in the city, like in the city of Baku itself, you can see that. So you have this whole contrast of the old and the new, and so beautifully and seamlessly everything merges with each other. So like when we spoke of the old town Baku, immediately a little after that you start seeing these buildings that are built in the European style, and that's when they decided they wanted their town to really look beautiful. And then you go a little ahead and then you see really modern buildings, and one of them I would say is the Haider Aliyev Center, which has a lot of theater and opera, and it's built by the famous Zaha Hadid architects of London. And it's such a beautiful structure. So, each monument, what I found in Baku is that each building, each monument is so unique that you cannot confuse it with anything else. Like one look at the Haider Aliyev Center, and you know that what it is. One look at Flame Towers, it's so distinct in that sense. And I think the best part that's worked for them, I mean, Azerbaijan has a history of a little bit of Persia, Armenia, the Turkic countries. The Turkic language is very similar to theirs, from which the Turkish language comes as well. So you can, for a few words, when you replace Turkish and Azerbaijani, can seem similar. And then, of course, the Soviets also ruled them. But in spite of all of that, they kind of built this very unique thing for themselves, and it's a very young country. So everywhere you go, you find them very excited, very there's a lot of energy, I feel, in the country. And I think Baku's developed. There's everything that you want. And Neil, we were talking of sports, so there are a lot of sports events that happened in Baku as well. So you have all the infrastructure for the best conferences, events. I mean, the F1 Baku takes place, right? So you have one of the best Grand Prix circuits in Baku as well.
Yeah. So like, it's the F1 calendar now has a few street circuits. It used to be Monaco only earlier. Now it has Singapore, it has Baku, and Baku, like, F1 has been taking place at Baku since 2017. In addition to that, there's also the 2018-2019 UEFA Europa League final that took place. It was one of the host cities for Euro 2020, which also took place there. There was the 2015 European Games. So a lot of events really did take place in Baku. And you know, we missed out saying something at the start. Like, it's called the city of winds, right? There
Yeah.
are a lot of harsh winds. So, like, one thing I'd really like to come back to, where what is a good time to visit, or being a country that is situated much closer to, say, Europe, and it's like one of those countries which is in Asia and also in
Mm.
Europe, can you visit it like at any time of the year?
Yes, Neil. So that kind of extends the time that you can visit. You're absolutely right there. It does get cold. So it was quite cold in December, but it was quite pleasant at the same time. So it's not biting cold in that sense. It was cold, but there was a huge Christmas market, and it was a lot of fun to be walking in the Christmas market, experiencing everything. So in spite of being like a Shia Muslim country, they are very open, and a lot of theater, opera, There is no restriction on the kind of clothing that you wear. There's no restriction at all. So it's really a lot of fun to go there and walk through. And of course, the summers are nice. The spring is very, very pleasant. But even in the winter, you can easily go there. And I will come to the question that you asked me, whether it is cheap. So I wouldn't call it cheap, but I would say it is quite economical. It's really easy on the pocket, very easy, especially if you're looking for this nice luxurious holiday, because there are some very good hotels out there. And you're looking for it, a European feel to the whole thing, but with Asian hospitality and some great food. So I think it really fits in. Once you get your airfare done, it's not very expensive to have a great holiday in Baku. So yeah.
So, Sunila, there's also a good spa culture in Baku, right? I've heard that it can also be a nice wellness or spa holiday that you could do to Baku over 3 or 4 days.
Yes, Neil. So in Baku itself, there are a lot of hammams, and these date back to the 12th century. So you can actually go and see them. Of course, with the more modern hotels coming in, all kinds of spa facilities and hammam are to be seen. But if you want to do something different and you want to try something a little different, then I would suggest going to Gobustan for the mud volcanoes, because the entire region is so rich in, like we said, with the geologically active, so fire burning, good petroleum oil, and the mud volcanoes out there, that the clay, the mud that comes out of the volcanoes is supposed to be really good. And people actually go in, and sometimes the guide just takes a bottle, takes a piece of mud that has become a little cool, and fills it and says, you could even apply it to your face and start, it's purifying. So there are a lot of spas around that area where you can go and actually soak yourself in mud and have some rejuvenation. So like, more than, it's something like 2000 mud volcanoes are known worldwide, and 344 are in Azerbaijan. So just imagine the number of mud volcanoes. And it's really good for health. Like, it's an anti-inflammatory, it's a good anesthetic. So not just for beauty, but for even for other treatments, this can be used. And I want to talk of one more really different spa, which, when I heard, it didn't sound like something I would do, but probably I'd try it. So there is a little town of Naftalan, about 320 kilometers west of Baku. So that's near Ganja, which is the second biggest city in Azerbaijan. And here they actually use crude oil that is too thick for commercial use, and you can't even use it for burning. So they said, what do we do with this crude oil? Crude oil. But more than some 100 years, like more than some 100, 150 years, people have actually been using it for spa treatment. So you can go and have a bath in crude oil out there. So there are centers there that run this little spa where you can go and soak yourself in crude oil. And again, this is also really good for your joints and your skin. So that's something that has been happening there as well. But yeah, if you don't want to try something different, then stick to Baku, go to a hammam, go to your spa, and it's a great holiday out there.
Speaking of something different, arm wrestling is also quite popular in Baku. And in fact, like the city features a lot of gyms and bars that host like these arm wrestling matches. So the World Arm Wrestling Federation has an office that is located in Baku. Now, let's come to the food for a bit, because both of us like food. And you were telling me about this rice dish that you had when you were in Azerbaijan. Tell us about that.
Yes, Neil. So, within the old town, you have a lot of restaurants that serve you traditional Azerbaijani food. We had a chance to have it at two places. So lunch was a very informal affair, and we just sat by a cafe. A lot of them understand Hindi. A lot of them, have a really close connect to India. So that felt really nice. And for dinner, we went to this very special place, which is a Shirvansha restaurant, and it is also a museum. So when you enter, you feel like you're in a palace or a castle or something, and it's in the old city. So the old fortress walls, and the restaurant is also similar. And then we went up the stairs, and they had people singing with their string instruments. They're playing them and all of that. And then of course the food comes. And when the food comes, we were actually quite full. So there's a lot of lamb and meat that is enjoyed out here. A lot of dry fruits, because the food is so good out there in Baku as well. And they do export caviar, by the way. So seafood is also really good out here. So on the one hand, we had seafood, and then comes this shah pulao, as they call it. So I said, yeah, it's like pulao fit for a king. And it felt nice that They call it pilau, we say pulao. So it's quite similar in that sense. And it's this big dish that comes in front of you that is covered in dough, and then they cut it open and to reveal really amazing aromatic fragrant, like a biryani, like a rice mixed with vegetables and meat mainly. And it's just something you have to try in Baku.
The number of times I've seen a video of this dish on Instagram is crazy.
Yeah.
And like, I can only imagine the fragrant rice and the meat, like, in
Yeah.
it marinated for a long time. That just like, makes your mouth water. But in addition to that, there's also another soupy dish called dushbara. Not many
Mhm.
people know about it, but it's like this soup which has those
Mhm.
small dumplings. So it's dumplings in a soup. Well, if
Mhm.
we go for Indian Chinese, you'll have those big dumplings, right, in clear soup.
Mhm.
But here, um, they say that if the cook manages to get 40 dumplings, which means making those dumplings in a particular shape in that small manner, like if that cook manages to do that 40 dumplings in one soup bowl, then he or she really can cook the soup. So dushbara is something
Wow.
that you should definitely try. And like you rightly said, lamb, beef,
Mm.
chicken, and seafood are like sort of national like foods
Mm.
of Azerbaijan. So if you're really there, make sure you try things like buglama, which is the
Mm.
steamed lamb stew. There's something called kotab, which is like a quesadilla, and it's one of the most famous dishes of Azerbaijan. There's also this sweet pastry, which is called badambara or
Mm.
badambura. And finally, there's something that you'll get in the old town of Baku, that is the tantuni, which is meat again, but that can be in a pita bread or in just like regular pav or regular bread. And it's the flavors of the meat oils, when they are marinated into, or they seep into the bread, it tastes quite good. So that is something that is or should definitely be on your food list for Azerbaijan.
Anil, also I want to add to that there is also the Azerbaijani jam that you should definitely try, and the halwa, which is their sweet dish. And with every meal, I mean, it is a tradition that Azerbaijanis love their tea, and most probably, if you like tea, you will definitely come back with packets of tea back home because it's quite nice. And the way they drink it is very different. Like a traditional Azerbaijani, they don't add the sugar to the tea. They actually put a sugar cube in their mouth and they let it slowly, they keep it there and then they keep sipping their tea over the sugar. So that was quite interesting to see how they managed to do that. But yeah, they love their tea.
Finally, about the nightlife, like it was also voted amongst the top 10 destinations like in the world for urban nightlife, right? So the bars and the
Yeah.
pubs just like go on until the wee hours of the morning. I have one more fact or one more story to finish it,
Mhm.
but do you think we've missed anything?
I think, Neil, we've practically covered almost everything that is to be done in Baku. We've mentioned the history, we've mentioned the newer side of Baku as well. And yes, you can take, well, maybe we can just add that there are boat rides and things that leave from the shore. So for a nice sunset cruise or something, maybe that is something people would love to add on. And I just want to say that Baku works well for everybody, whether it is a family holiday, whether it is a friends, you want to just go and have fun. You mentioned the nightlife. It's a great place. And like we said, it is easy on the pocket. Excellent facilities. So it really works very well with the corporates as well. In fact, we've done more than 1,200 people in Baku at one time. So that was a biggest achievement, I think, for Baku as well, that we had more than 1,200 corporates together. And there were so many hotels that could take that load. So even the hotels are very nice. So
Yeah, one of the things that, like, why does Formula One like finalize on a destination? Of course, the country pays Formula One a lot to host the Grand Prix, but they need that inventory to host those many people in a particular city. And if F1 can do it, there are many corporates in India who've started going to Baku, and that is something that has really picked up. Now, I would like to end it with something which is the world's tallest, world's biggest, blah blah blah, right?
mhm,
So in Baku, there used to be the National Flag Square, which
mhm,
had the world's tallest flagpole. But that was only until 2010, because then there was something in Turkmenistan that took over that. But You know how I said that Baku is often known as the city of winds and it gets too windy over there. So they shut down this flagpole, or they closed it, because there were reports that it was so windy that there were holes being made into the flag because of just the wind. So that is how I would like to end. Thanks a lot for tuning everyone to Travel, Explore, Celebrate Life. And we have passed 55 episodes now, and this is just going to continue. Every Saturday, 10 a.m., you will have a new episode from us at Veena World. Keep emailing your suggestions at neil@veenaworld.com and sunila@veenaworld.com. Your suggestions give us ideas, and that's how more and more newer episodes come in. So thanks a lot for tuning in. We will see you next week. Goodbye.